Welcome to Soltron. Today I wanted to go over the custom I did of the DX Leon Buster and Tega Sword. So you can see this is how he looks with all his joints installed. So it's very clear where the ball joints have been. And then one here. But you can see for the most part, he stands a little bit more naturally than the default version. He's a little less stiff looking. But I'm going to go over all the articulation in a minute. You can see I think he looks pretty good, a lot like the mini Pla version. All right, so one of the things I did was I put this like head crest. I moved it back a little bit so it's not directly above his head anymore. It's just like more behind it and kind of frames it like a mane. So that's one of the many things I did. And then this shoulder pad now has a ball joint so it can articulate a little bit better. So it kind of like covers up the original shoulder pad. It does a pretty good job of that. And then the head does have articulation, so he can now look around. I made it so he can look this direction a little bit better than the other direction. So you can see that makes him look a lot more natural already. And then I did put a ball joint in this bicep here, which I think helps make this look more like an arm instead of just a giant lion hanging off his body. And then the ball joints are strong enough to hold that up, surprisingly. He does still have his gimmick, but I accidentally shortened it a little bit. There's a little bit of plastic in there that's blocking the trigger from being pulled back all the way, but he does still work. And then another cool thing is all his electronics are still fully functional. Good. So you get good light up on his head there, and then you can hold down the trigger. Then get his Leon Gatling burst. So that's pretty cool. So that still works very nicely. And then there is the trigger to get him back into Gauntlet mode. And that's still in place as well. So everything, all electronics still fully functioning, which I think is pretty impressive. I think it also goes to show that they could have made an articulated version of this guy if they wanted to. They just didn't, I guess, to increase mini Pla sales. So yeah, I think he looks pretty good. And another cool thing I did was on this arm, I made this little Leo leg. It can fold up to just help make this look a little more cohesive as an arm cannon. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. And you get a good amount of articulation, so you can kind of like two-hand this cannon, I guess. I guess the hand should actually go over top. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So you can get the Mega Buster kind of mode going. That's probably as good as it's gonna get. Can maybe be a little bit better, but that's not too bad looking. I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah, we got a lot of good articulation in here. So we'll go ahead and go over his head articulation. So the ring still does fold up very nicely, and then the visor does close, of course. So it's pretty much unaltered. I did cut off a lot of plastic here just to give him the ability to turn his head to the side a little bit more. And you can see what I did. I just put two ball joints there, and that gives him all the range of motion that you need. And it's very cool that it just collapses back into ring mode almost seamlessly. It's maybe like 1 millimeter thicker than it was before. It makes almost no difference. So I think that's pretty well done. And then let's see, I guess, let's just go ahead and pull off all his Leon bits and we can get his articulation. You see I used my Strux ball joints like I always do. And then we can go ahead and swap him out with Tega Sword Red, which has kind of the same thing going on. This was like a more primitive version that's not quite as good. Whoops. All right, so I was using his wings as a little bit of a display stand, so hopefully that works out. So here's Tega Sword Red. Let me fix up his head a little bit. So like posing in a dynamic kind of flying, jumping kind of pose. So you can see him with his sword out. And I think that looks pretty cool. He looks very dynamic. So that's pretty fun. Oh, and I should mention another little thing I did was I carved out their faces a little bit and pushed them forward. It's probably not even noticeable, but their face mask and their eyes actually are a little bit more forward oriented, so they're not as buried as much. And I did the same for red as well. Again, it probably doesn't even make any difference at all. They just got pushed up like 1 millimeter. So a little bit of work for kind of nothing. But anyway, you can see he's got these nice ball joint shoulders, so that gives him all the range of articulation. And then he's got elbows as well with bicep swivels because they're just ball joints. So very nice articulation there. And then for like some of the other modes, maybe for the Tyranno hammer, it's also got these weird kind of like butterfly kind of joints just to get something like further away from the body in case he needs that. And that's also for transformation. So that is actually useful for glove mode. And then he's got these giant orange ball joints here, and that gives him like a good amount of outward kick. So you get like 90 degree of high kick or whatever. You get a good amount of forward kick, and then if the wings were out of the way, you get full backward kick, easy. And then he's also got knee joints as well, which are also those ball joints. And if you like kind of cheat it a little bit, you can actually get more than 90 degrees on the knees, and you can kind of get like a little bit of thigh swivel. But really the hip swivel comes from up here. And his transformation's a little bit different, so I did have to ball joint his cod piece here. But yeah, you get, now that his legs can actually spread a little bit, you get some pretty cool looking poses out of him, which are much more dynamic. So I think they really dropped the ball with this figure. If they would have just given him good articulation, I think a lot more people would have been interested in this figure because he just looks very cool now that he can actually pose. And this guy was a bit of a challenge because there is kind of limited amount of space you have to work with. So like these shoulder joints, I did have to carve out this gap inside of him to put these double joints, but I think they very nicely clean up. And I did have to lengthen his arms a little bit to compensate. But I think his natural standing pose looks a little bit better, or his A pose, I think looks way better than he does out of package. I think just a static pose looks very good. Might look up a little bit so you can see his face. But yeah, I think that looks pretty nice. And you can see like the giant ball joints I put here, and then just like the little Lego one, and then the knee joints. And then I didn't fill these up with plastic. I'll probably do that later. I just want to see what else is going to happen before I start adding all his pieces back. I definitely would like to get a second one of these guys and just use all the extra pieces to fill in all his gaps, or maybe get that belt buckle accessory and use that to fill in all of his hollow parts, because I think that would look pretty good. But yeah, that's basically it. And then transforming this guy is pretty much the same as always. You're going to do this. You're going to lift up the legs. You're going to close up the little, what do you call it, fingertips. And then you do have to like move this around kind of a lot. It's got a lot of fiddly little ball joints, which I could probably just glue some of them. And then this is going to go back to its original position. And then you go ahead and close up the ring. So you can see he's pretty much the same. And then you go ahead and rotate these up, rotate his blade up. And then you use those double joints in the shoulders. So this is a pretty cool thing, is this double joint goes down and it actually presses his glove button. So when you put this back in pinky mode, it's actually going to register that he's no longer in his robot mode. So that's pretty cool, is it just barely pushes that button right there. And if I lift it up, it's now releasing the button to awaken. And then when I push it back in, he's now back in Gauntlet mode. Then we just straighten out his pinky. Okay, that's kind of annoying. And then you do the same thing, use the butterfly or double joint here, and then this is going to become his thumb. Oops. It's kind of hard to do this with one hand. There we go. So there's his grasping like thumb. All right, and there he is in his glove mode, and I think you can agree that this is way better than the mini claw glove. He still looks much better. He doesn't just have a random fist right here. So this actually looks pretty close to the original DX version. It's still quite clean. The only annoying thing is that the knees can't quite go all the way down because the ball joint is now here, and I have to leave these clips in his chest for Tyranno mode and maybe some other modes. But you can see the ring still fits in. It looks correct the way it is. So everything still looks pretty good, right? And another cool thing I did was I did carve out this section here so my hand can now slide all the way in. You can see that plastic used to block. I do have a small hand, so each one of my fingers is actually in the right place. So that's pretty cool. So I can actually hold this correctly now. So I enjoy that. So I can actually like get my whole hand in here. So that's nice. So that was a nice little bonus to articulating this guy. And technically, if his wings weren't here, I'm thinking about putting these on a ball joint. He could probably get a fist mode because he does have this bend in the knee right here. So he probably could bend his fingers down if these wings weren't in the way. I don't know what the middle finger would do. But the thumb can also splay out because it has all these ball joints. So you can actually get the Gauntlet to kind of like spread out all its fingers. It kind of looks weird. You can get the thumb maybe in the proper place. That looks a little bit more natural, right? So that's kind of a cool thing it can do. You can kind of get, maybe this should be like more here. Oops, popped out the ball joint. But yeah, so you can kind of get the Gauntlet to spread out and like imitate a spread out hand, which is pretty cool. So yeah, did a lot of good work with this guy. I think he's 1,000 times better now, and I'm actually really satisfied with this robot. He's very cool. So I was planning on customizing this guy the whole time, and I'm glad I did. He took a lot of work, but I think it paid off nicely. And I do have one other little secret thing, is we got all the Leon Buster parts. I guess there's only 2 parts. So this still clips back into place as usual. And then you can go ahead and straighten the Leon legs, right? And then this is on a ball joint now. This is on a ball joint now. And then his torso, because that bicep swivel, is also on a ball joint. So you have that, right? You have the basic Leon Buster gun. So that can still do exactly what it needs to do. And a nice little bonus I added was I put ball joints back here. So now his little, of course, that's going to fall out on camera. So now his little Leon legs can actually open up, and he can actually become a nice little partner animal. He actually has a beast mode now. So that's pretty cool, right? Like that, I think that is pretty fun. And of course I plan on doing that with the other little role play weapons that I get too in the future. So I'll do that with Unicorn and Tyranno when I get those next. So what do you think? Pretty cool custom, right? I think, yeah, it's too bad they just didn't build them this way to begin with, because it didn't take too much work. All the pieces could have easily been put in place, but I don't know. It just wasn't designed that way. So anyway, hope you like that, and I'll see you in the next one.